Welcome back, Fantasy Endgame community. I'm Pierre. He's Chris. How about we tell you who's going to win your fantasy football leagues for you this year at every position? Look, we're not just going to throw out random takes and names of guys we like, our guys. We dig into the numbers, we look at the stats, and we try to realistically project who we think could be this year's league winners at every position to help you pick those players whenever you can. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start with the most important position on the field. That's quarterback. So, Chris, who could be this year's league-winning quarterback in fantasy?
Well, I've already talked about Trey Lance a couple times, and I do think he has league-winning potential. But I want to talk about somebody else who I feel like is going a little bit under the radar, and that is Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson this year, I feel, is going to be similar to what we saw in 2019 when he ran for over 1,200 yards and had 7 rushing touchdowns. Because contrary to what J.K. Dobbins is tweeting out about his recovery being great and he's going to be ready week 1, I don't buy it. Let's not forget, this was a multi-ligament knee tear. Those are tough to recover from. Even if he is ready week 1, he's not going to be 100% and probably won't be 100% the entire season. Gus Edwards also coming off an ACL tear. So I think Lamar Jackson is truly going to have to be this entire Ravens offense. And we already know the rushing upside. He's had 2 seasons of over 1,000 yards. But the difference between Lamar Jackson today and the 2019 version of Lamar Jackson is he is a much improved thrower than he was back then. You may be asking, well, what about losing Marquise Brown? Doesn't that hurt? I don't think it does, because he has Rashad Bateman, who, even though he didn't put up huge fantasy numbers last year because he was struggling with injury for a lot of the time, he is a great wide receiver, and he runs the more intermediate routes, and he runs them very well, which I feel plays better to Lamar Jackson's strength than the deep ball, which is what Marquise Brown primarily did. With Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews there, no real running game, I think we see another 1,000 plus yard rushing season from Lamar Jackson with an improved throwing season, and I think he could be just as good or even better than he was for fantasy in 2019 and win people leagues.
Absolutely agree. You know, this big reason why Rashad Bateman, I'm going to surprise you by not picking him as my wide receiver, just because I've talked about him so much already. You know I love Bateman, especially this year. But yeah, Lamar Jackson actually going to be a little bit underrated by some people this year. All right, so talk about a guy who's going to be drafted even lower, not even in the top 12, so typically not even a QB1 for fantasy. That is Derek Carr. Look, it seems like his whole career, Derek Carr has just been a little bit undervalued, especially in fantasy, but he keeps putting up good numbers. Let's look at what Derek Carr has going into this coming season that he didn't before. So obviously, Davante Adams. I think that's going to help. But let's remember too, last year, he didn't have Darren Waller for a lot of the season. He missed 6 games, half a season basically, without his top target and top tight end, Darren Waller. And now he gets one of the best receivers in the game, Davante Adams. And let's not forget the whole John Gruden thing. Remember how they had to switch systems and coaches mid-season? Yeah, there's a lot that he had to deal with. And despite that, he threw for 4,800 yards last year. So if he came close to 5,000 yards, even with all of that going on, let's just imagine what he could do this year. And new coach Josh McDaniels, well, he's done okay in New England. I think it's safe to say they're going to get the most out of their players, but especially Carr. That's what he's known for, is working closely with quarterbacks. I really think at QB 13, you can get a guy like Carr as your starter and you wait and you load up on the other positions. That's exactly what you want to do. I really like Derek Carr this season more than ever. All right, now let's go to tight end. Always a tricky position. It's like you either get a stud or you just wait and you draft whoever, or maybe you just stream. Well, we have a better idea in mind. How about you draft one of these guys? So, Chris, who you like at tight end?
I still really like Kyle Pitts this year, and I like them more with Matt Ryan, of course, but I still think Kyle Pitts is going to be great. 68 catches, 1,026 yards as a rookie. That's incredible. If a wide receiver had put up those numbers as a rookie last year, we'd be hyping him up to the moon right now. And I know a lot of people look at this and say, oh no, he's stuck with Marcus Mariota or Desmond Ridder. But you know what? I don't think it matters for Kyle Pitts, because the defense isn't going to be elite. They're going to be playing from behind a lot. They're still going to have to throw the ball. Marcus Mariota is not a gunslinger type who's going to chuck it down the field. He's going to take the easy throws, which is going to be Kyle Pitts a lot. And we don't even know what kind of NFL QB Desmond Ridder is going to be. He's probably going to take the easy throws as well. And you could say, well, they added some pass catchers. Sure, They drafted Drake London, who I like, but now he's a rookie who has to get acclimated to the NFL game. And they added Brian Edwards, who, okay, he's fine, but what has he ever really done at the NFL level? I still think Kyle Pitts is in line for a ton of targets in this offense. I think he'll catch a ton of passes. No, he may not have, 10 plus touchdown upside, because that's just how this offense is going to be. If he can get you 80 plus catches, 1,100, 1,200 yards and catch 5 plus touchdowns, he's absolutely going to be one of the best tight ends in fantasy this year. I think he's going to be one of those elite tight ends that we see every year, who's kind of on the cusp of being great, but not there yet, and then finally becomes great that year. I think this is the year. Still love Kyle Pitts as an elite league-winning tight end.
And you think about a guy like, say, well, he's being drafted fairly high among tight ends. Well, so was Mark Andrews last year. He was drafted as a top 5 tight end everywhere, and he wound up being a league winner because he was the tight end 1. Okay, so even Kyle Pitts doesn't wind up as the tight end 1. I think he's close enough that, yeah, based on where he's going, absolutely worth it. All right, so I'm going to pull out a name that I kind of surprised myself too. The more I think about it, I really like Dallas Goedert. And I kind of felt at first like maybe he was in that dead zone of tight ends, like not really one of the studs. But really looking at it, he is coming on and he's finally maybe ready to emerge as one of those top 5 guys and living up to the billing that he's had since being selected by the Eagles. Now, the Eagles obviously are more run heavy these days, but now they went out and got AJ Brown. Some people might look at that as a negative and say, well, that's just another mouth to feed. But a lot of times what happens, it just makes the offense click better. It might present more red zone opportunities for Goedert. It will open him up across the field. And we know Jalen Hurts has also gotten better as a passer. So here's the thing you might not know. If you look at last year, right? So they kept Zach Ertz. The Eagles still had that Ertz-Goedert combo. And then Ertz got traded to Arizona. Ever since then, from week 7 on, in the last 10 games of the regular season that he played, Dallas Goedert was the fantasy tight end 6. That's right, only 5 tight ends outscored him in fantasy PPR leagues. This offense is even just a little bit better than it was last year. I don't think Brown's presence is going to hurt Goedert. I actually think it might help. Okay, so Goedert absolutely has the upside to be a top 5 tight end. He's only been drafted as the tight end 8. I think Goedert is in the mold of those league-winning tight ends ready to break out. All right, now let's go on to wide receiver, the glamour position. Who you like there?
Mike Evans has been great every year of his career. And it feels like this year, everything is breaking perfect for Mike Evans to have an absolutely incredible season. First, he lost Tom Brady. Then he got Tom Brady back. We know Chris Godwin coming off of ACL, probably not going to be ready week 1. Who knows when he'll be ready. Also, like J.K. Dobbins, a multi-ligament tear, probably won't be 100% at all at any point this season. Gronk decides to retire. We know Antonio Brown lost his mind officially last season. The only pass catcher they've actually brought in is Russell Gage. Mike Evans is going to have a huge target share in a Tom Brady-led offense, and people are still not drafting this guy as a top 5 wide receiver when he could absolutely not only be top 5, he could be top 3, and I wouldn't even be shocked if he was top 1 this season. That's what his upside is like in this offense. If you look at the 2 playoff games without Chris Godwin, he had 17 receptions, 236 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I don't know what that equates to over a 17-game season, but it's a ton of fantasy points. Tom Brady is going to throw to the guy who gets open, who's good, and who he trusts. And I think you said it on one of our videos recently, Tom Brady didn't come out of retirement to hand the ball off. They might not throw it 700 plus times, but they're going to throw it 600 plus times. And a lot of those passes are going to go Mike Evans' way. Mike Evans has an insanely high floor this year and an insanely high ceiling. And it wouldn't surprise me if Mike Evans is on a ton of championship teams when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe Mike Evans is just too obvious of a pick, or is it just boring because he's a veteran who's been an elite receiver for so long, right? Maybe he's just not sexy enough for some people. Don't overthink it. Maybe draft the guy who's the clear number 1 receiver and is catching passes from the best quarterback of all time. Seems pretty obvious to me. All right, so wide receiver, I had a tough time with this one. Look, Rashad Bateman, he's my guy, but I've talked about him way too much. I think I'm going to go with Hollywood Brown. Hollywood Brown was an effective but inconsistent receiver at times in Baltimore because even though he was the top target there, that connection didn't always hit. There's sometimes it was his own fault, right? Those drops, obviously, you remember that one game he dropped 3 touchdowns in one game. And there's, of course, times where he was wide open down the field and Lamar just didn't quite hit him. Well, now he goes to Arizona with one of the best deep ball passers, obviously Kyler Murray, in an air raid offense that is going to pass it quite a bit. And the thing is, they made a point of acquiring him on draft day for a reason. He is going to be the top target in Arizona. Let's not get that mixed up. We know DeAndre Hopkins is going to miss 6 games. We might not see the same DeAndre Hopkins that we've seen before. He showed some signs of decline toward last year, was never quite himself. So I wouldn't be surprised if even when Nutt comes back, that we still see Hollywood in that featured role. And who else is really going to threaten him? Rondale Moore, he's just kind of a gadget guy. Zach Ertz, yeah, he'll be targeted, but he's a tight end. If we see that connection really build early in the season, I wouldn't be surprised if Marquise Brown smashes his ADP. I think he could see a lot more short intermediate targets than we think too. He's not just that deep threat guy. He can also get open across the field. So I really like Hollywood, and he's a guy I think could wind up being a league winner. All right, here we go. It's time for running back. We all want that one guy who is going to lead us to the promised land. Who is it, Chris?
Well, the obvious answer here is Najee Harris, but I'm going to give you somebody else because I've talked about Najee Harris enough and he's going in the first round. So since 2015, we've had 5 rookie running backs finish as top 5 fantasy backs, and we've had 11 finish as top 12. But somehow, a rookie running back this year who was drafted almost in the first round, whose team is going to give him the majority of the snaps, the majority of the carries, and the majority of the receptions, is being drafted as the RB18, and that is Breece Hall. I don't understand the love for Michael Carter. He had like 3 good games last year. Most of his work was done in the receiving game. And now they go out, they draft Breece Hall, and people are like, well, too bad for Breece Hall because he's stuck with Michael Carter now. No, too bad for Michael Carter because he's behind Breece Hall now. That's how this is going to work. The Jets did not draft Breece Hall because they're like, we like Michael Carter so much that we just need a compliment back for Michael Carter. No, they drafted Breece Hall because they want a 3-down workhorse running back, and that is what Breece Hall is going to be. That is what he is. He projects as a 3-down workhorse running back. Michael Carter will still be involved. Sure, he'll catch some passes, he'll get some carries, but we're talking about a guy who's looking at 15 plus carries every single week and probably 3 plus receptions every single week that you're drafting as the RB18. Sure, maybe top 5 is his ceiling, but I think top 10 is well within his range of outcomes. And for the spot you're getting him, that will definitely be a league winning running back. So stop making excuses why you're not drafting Breece Hall. Stop worrying about Michael Carter. Just draft Breece Hall.
I will do just that. Look, I don't get it either. The number 1 running back selected in the draft, and people are like, yeah, maybe he'll be my second guy. Like, I don't get that. I think it's because it's the Jets, not so much Carter, but just, it's the Jets. Staying completely on brand. Look, here's a guy that I think we're reading too much into last year. Despite the fact, he tore his Achilles, but he's back. He is 100% because he said so himself. It's Cam Akers. I get it. It's a tough injury to come back from. He has already defied all logic in coming back last year in the same year. No, he wasn't himself. But look at his performance in the playoffs, which is really where he played. Let's keep in mind, this is the NFL playoffs. The defenses he faced in that playoff run, 3 of them and the 4 opponents were top 7 running defenses, like Tampa Bay. No running back did well against Tampa Bay last year, okay? San Francisco, and also Cincinnati. But even despite all that, guess what? It was just him. He was the featured back. He's still getting a ton of carries despite not even being super effective. We know Sean McVay has basically said, you're the guy, and that's it. He's talked this offseason about being back to himself. Looks good. We've heard no reports of setbacks or anything like that. Okay, so I think we're going to see fully healthy Cam Akers as the featured back. You always have to chase volume. When you're looking at the guy who's going to carry your team for fantasy, volume comes first. Okay, team context. Is he on a good offense? I think so, right? The Rams offense, obviously pretty good, and you're getting him at a lower ADP, which means he's not even being drafted as a starting number 1 running back in fantasy. but I guarantee he will finish at the very least as a top 12, if not top 5 running back. That's how confident I am in Cam Akers this year. All right, so those are our league winners at every position. Guys, check out more fantasy analysis all offseason long. It's almost draft season. We're ready to help you win. Join us on Discord. Check out the link in the description below, and you can join this community as we continue to grow. All right, thanks for watching.